Nothing is ever set in stone, and anything's possible, but more often than not, people often say adaptations of books never live up to the original source material, and in general, sequels never do as good as the first installment. So from the get-go, the next film in the Chronicles of Narnia series had a lot to prove. After so many years, I had forgotten nearly everything that happened in this movie, but since then I've read the 1951 book of the same name, so now I can officially talk about the Chronicles of Narnia, Prince Caspian. A year has passed by since the children stepped through the wardrobe. In Narnia, centuries have passed since the defeat of the White Witch. Now the foursome are sent back to Narnia to find that everything was destroyed, and the Narnia that they once knew is gone forever. They come to aid the young Prince Caspian, who is leading a group of old Narnians to wage war against his malicious uncle Miraz, who rules Narnia with an iron fist. Will they succeed? And when will Aslan return? There's a solid reason or two behind why I've forgotten a majority of what Prince Caspian was all about since the first time I saw it. It's partially my fault and partially the movie's fault. I saw this in theater, specifically a drive-in theater, and those are amazing but incredibly limited in how you can watch them. If there's just two people, great, that works out really well. If there's a third person in the vehicle, well, you better have a nice big comfortable car, because I was the third person in that car. I was in the back, sitting on not a middle seat, but rather an incredibly uncomfortable armrest, ducking my head, trying to see the movie for that entire 2.5-hour runtime, giving myself a crick in the neck in the process. So already it wasn't the best experience, and on top of that, the movie wasn't all that great either. Unlike the first film that emphasized on the slower, more emotional aspects of the story when need be, and emphasizing on the action when need be, Prince Caspian emphasized only on the action. And when the books got slower, they decided to include even more action in the movie. So that essentially the entire thing was just this action-heavy film. And I compare it to the likes of Quantum of Solace, where it's just jam-packed with action, and honestly, you never care. You don't care because it doesn't take the time to focus on characters like it did last time. No real emotional weight. And a really bad job explaining why Prince Caspian is so important in the first place. Look, I didn't really care that much for the book either. Out of all the books that I've read from the series thus far, that was probably my least favorite as well, but I can at least appreciate the introduction of the story, which is the most important part, kickstarting everything else. In the beginning of the movie, Caspian is woken by a really old guy who helps him escape before he gets killed. But you really have no idea why, because the movie is so bad at explaining it, because it preferred to just get right into the action right away. I've read the book though, so I kind of understand what that scene was doing, and I'd like to explain. So the old guy that you see in the beginning of this movie that wakes up Caspian, you know nothing about him in the movie. Not really. But in the books, you know him to be Caspian's teacher. Caspian was born in Narnia, hundreds of years after the children had ruled and already left Narnia. And in that time, he was taught that the magic of Narnia was a myth, a tall tale story told to the kids when they're young. The old man would tell Caspian in secret that Narnia was indeed a land filled with magic, that the stories that he had heard all his life were true. He's essentially Han Solo in The Force Awakens, and Caspian is the rightful heir to the throne, and his uncle hates him. So when his uncle has his own child, if Caspian's killed, his own flesh and blood becomes the new heir to the throne. So Caspian's in danger and he runs away. It's kind of a Game of Thrones intro in the book, honestly. The movie glosses over like 90% of that, just to start with a bang and get Caspian on the run. I'd also say a ton of the movie was just added stuff that nobody cares about anyway, just to have more action. Everything emotional and important was almost completely vacant. And Aslan is barely even in the movie. To top it all off, they add this romantic interest between Susan and Caspian, which was not in the book. At least not to my memory, and I just read it. I expected to appreciate this movie a little bit more this time around, having read the book, but I feel like the opposite occurred. This movie is not nearly as good as the first. All it is boring action stuff. I'm curious about Dawn Treader, though. I had a similar experience with that movie as well. I don't remember it that much, but when it came down to the books, I definitely liked that book way more than Prince Caspian. But is there anything good about Prince Caspian? Yes, the graphics have improved in the last 3 years since the first movie. It's not a huge noticeable difference, but what it does do is blend much more realistically with everything else. Aslan is still probably the weakest out of the rest of the graphics, but because he isn't in a lot of the movie, you end up being quite a bit forgiving in that respect. The music is still amazing, maybe even better this time around. Harry Gregson Williams is a god with that score. The cinematography and editing are on point. I mean, it feels epic, even if the story isn't that strong. The cast of characters are still likable and mostly still believable as siblings, and somewhere in this movie lies an important message, though probably not as blatant or as good, honestly, as The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. It's not what I would consider a bad movie by any respects. I just think it could have easily been more relatable and memorable if they did what the first film did and emphasize on character growth and emotionally impactful moments. Even if they are slow, I mean, take a risk. Let those slow moments happen, but alas. Let's go ahead and take a look at my final score for a second. My unbiased and biased scores didn't agree like they did last time. I think in general, it's a film that is made better than it's received. From an unbiased vantage point, I still have to hand it to them for crafting a massive world of endless possibilities, filled to the brim with likable talking animals that look great graphic-wise. The kids were great, and the introduction to Caspian wasn't too bad. It could have been worse. I think they did what they needed to do, and my unbiased score is a fairly decent 80%. My bias score is quite a bit lower, however, since I don't think this movie is all that memorable. They missed the mark in a lot of different areas that should have been easy to maneuver. They clearly wanted to do more action than meaningful moments, and it shows. Overall, I don't think the movie is trash, but I wasn't impressed. My score here is 68%. Meaning that when we compare the two scores together, we come to the final rating of 74%. 74 out of 100 possible stars. It's okay. I still think that the movie is forgettable overall, but it's fair. Unfortunately, fair is quite a bit worse than the first, but we'll see what I think about the third movie soon enough. Guys, what were your thoughts on Prince Caspian if you have seen it? What did you think about it compared to the book if you've read it? Let me know in the comment section down below. And as for YouTube, you guys know what to do. Hit the like, subscribe button, and bell to be notified when I come up with the next review. And until then, peace out.
Dave examines movies we just watch for fun. Davey is the expert. He is the #1 critic that I go to when I need a movie.